Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Unexpected RPG Podcast. I'm Oz, that's Cass, this is Mac.
Yeah, she's going to be reading us off some questions, a couple frequently asked questions that we get pretty often from friends and family, as well as a couple questions that some viewers have asked. So take it away.
Okay, who introduced you to tabletop RPGs and what was your first?
So I'll start with this one. I've been playing RPGs since I was a little kid. My father introduced them to me. He's been playing RPGs since he was a little kid back in like the 80s, young teenager, back when they first became a thing. And so as soon as we were old enough to understand them, read and write and all that, he kind of started introducing us to them. So I've been playing them for as long as I can remember. And as for the reason why I started, that's because I, by extension, kind of introduced Oz into RPGs.
Yeah, you introduced me about, what would you say, 6, 7 years ago, roughly?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Not well. Actually, it's probably closer to like 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Honestly,
yeah, it's pretty close to that.
because we were teenagers.
Yeah, I was probably 13, 14, somewhere in that area. And you randomly invited me and was just like, hey man, me and my dad and brother and sister were all going to play Cyberpunk. And my first thought was, how do you play Cyberpunk and what is Cyberpunk? And then that's when he kind of introduced me to the whole world of pen and paper RPGs. And from that moment on, I've been hooked.
I was introduced to RPGs when me and Oz got together, and I think my first one that I ever played was Lasers and Feelings.
Yeah, I think so. It was a kind of late night pickup game of Lasers and Feelings. Because for those of you that don't know, Lasers and Feelings is a game that's meant to be played just in one session without much planning. You just do it in one night. And so, yeah, I find that to be a good introduction for RPGs in general because the rules are very simple and you can pretty quickly get somebody introduced.
Why do you like tabletop RPGs?
The whole reason why I like them is just the creativity behind the whole game, the amount of time that the GM puts in it, and really makes you feel like you're in the world that you're playing. And also, it's just fun being an older person, getting to use your imagination as much as, say, a author or anything like that, and it's just a blast.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a very good outlet for creative people. It allows you to it's just really good for the creative process in general because it's basically collaborative storytelling. You're working with a bunch of other people to create a story. You're creating a world. You're creating characters, scenarios that they go through. You throw in twists and turns, and of course, it's also fun. Hear people try and do their accents and their impressions of different people, and yeah, it's just the general creativity of it is really the most appealing thing for me as well.
For me, I would have to say it gives you a chance to be a complete other person or being. Even before I was introduced, I've always liked the idea of being able to be pretty much whatever you wanted to be, look however you wanted to look. What are your top three favorite RPGs?
So I can start with this one. Top three favorite RPGs for me. Number one would be Cyberpunk 2020 specifically. I haven't played Cyberpunk Red yet, but I've been planning on it. Cyberpunk 2020 is not the one that introduced me to it, but it's just my favorite. I love the world of Cyberpunk. I've been obsessed with Cyberpunk aesthetics since the first time I played it back when I was a teenager. And I love movies like Blade Runner, and I love Cyberpunk themed stuff in general. So Cyberpunk 2020 is easily my number one. Number two would probably be Lasers and Feelings. It's just great for picking up and playing. You really have to think on your feet with it a lot because there's no planning involved. You just do it in one night. As I said earlier, it's just really fun. And then my third favorite would probably just be D&D 5th edition specifically. I really like 5th edition. I think that one's got some good balance, and I like a lot of what they've added in the later editions of D&D.
Mine would probably have to be Cyberpunk as well. I mean, I've been hooked ever since I started playing because of him. And like he said, the whole aesthetic behind the world of Cyberpunk is just phenomenal. And it's been such a good spin off to other outlets of entertainment, such as movies like Blade Runner and Cowboy Bebop, and like all the kind of major things you think of when you think of the word cyberpunk. Um, my second would probably also be Lasers and Feelings. It's kind of also what I cut my teeth on when it came to uh, pen and paper RPGs. And then third would probably be the most recent one that we've been playing is Everybody's John. It's really fun. You're all controlling this guy's life as a personality.
Yeah,
I
voice
guess.
in his head.
Yeah, a voice in his head, and it's just a blast just to see where everybody takes the world of John or Jane, depending on which person you play as.
My answers would probably have to be the same as Oz. Lasers and Feelings would probably be my top one, though, just because it was the first one that I ever actually played. And then Cyberpunk, and then Everybody is John. Or Jane.
Yeah, or Jane.
What makes a good GM?
I'm gonna let you all go first on this one because I'm usually GMing and I want to hear what you all think makes a good GM.
I want to hear your 2 cents first.
Somebody who has, in my personal opinion, a pretty out there imagination. Just because I don't want like a basic story, I'd rather have a very, very, very unique story that you've probably just never even heard of. And then somebody who doesn't really care to bend and break some of the rules of some games just to make sure that the characters and the people playing are having fun.
Yeah, Matt Mercer kind of hit that on the head when he said that. For me, what makes a good GM is kind of along the lines that Max said. Just somebody who's really creative, who's really understanding to help out newer players, and willing to kind of fudge the numbers and fix the rules a certain way for new players, just to get them hooked and introduced to pen and paper RPGs. And be a good like storyteller. And yeah, you get on YouTube and you watch other RPG channels, and you don't have to be good at voices and all that. Just pretty much be a good storyteller. That's pretty much my baseline on a good GM.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those. I think storytelling is a big thing. If you can do the voices and get into the characters, that definitely helps. But as long as you're just willing to, roll with the punches with what players do, not being super crunchy, not forcing your rules and your outlook on everything, because I think that's one of the most annoying things with, GMs in general, is when they've got a very clear, specific route that they want people to take or approach to something, and when the group decides, well, we want to do something else that we think is funny or interesting, and the GM's just kind of like, well, no, that wasn't my idea. Because while the GM creates the world and the scenarios, at least to a degree, it is, as I said earlier, collaborative storytelling, and I think it's important for everyone to be able to have a voice and to affect the outcome and the story. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just don't be so strict on the rules and the scenario in general. Kind of, as Oz said, just be willing to fudge the numbers occasionally. If it's going to make it more fun, then just roll with the punches a little bit. You want there to be consequences to what happens, but you don't want everybody to just feel like they have no say in anything that happens. So yeah, just be willing to roll with it and just help everyone have fun.
Out of all your characters you've made, who was your favorite and why?
So my favorite is a Cyberpunk character, Cyberpunk 2020 character that I made years ago. It was probably back in like 2018 or something, 2019 maybe, because I played as him again in 2020, I think. I've played as him multiple times for different for different Cyberpunk sessions, but it was a character named Will for Cyberpunk 2020. He was. I just went with the roles entirely for the character's backstory. So he ended up having like multiple siblings. I think it was like 4 different siblings, and one of them was a twin, but then the rest were all younger than him. And so, and their parents, I think, had. Well, I think one of their parents died in an accident, and then the other one had amnesia or something, and like didn't remember that they existed. So Will and the twin sister had to kind of take care of the younger siblings, and they were broke. When I rolled for his job, he got like the lowest tier job in his profession. So
Wasn't he unemployed?
actually, so he was currently unemployed. He had rolled a job that was like the lowest tier, and I think had worked that job for like 2 years and then was unemployed. So he had no money. He was always struggling. So it was one of those things where when everybody else would be more focused on the mission and trying to get stuff done, I would kind of have Will picking up quarters off the ground or eddies, and he'd just be struggling to get by, and he would try and negotiate with some of the other crew members occasionally about trying to get a little bit bigger of a cut than some of the others just because he was so desperate. So that was a fun character to play.
We're really going to have to find that character sheet.
Yeah, I think I've got it around here somewhere. I just have to look for it. I haven't used it in years, but...
My favorite is also a Cyberpunk character. He was actually a character the same time that Will was created. He was... his name was Rob. He was a fixer. The whole reason why he's my favorite character out of all was not just because he was the first tabletop RPG character I ever created, but it was also because one session we were all at the safe house, and for some reason I was up on the roof. Somebody was coming to attack us or something, and out of nowhere I shot a guy in the foot. Just opened up a black hole, but my damage was so high that it just killed him instantly. And it's one of the most memorable things in all of pretty much my playthrough life.
Yeah, that was a big moment. I think you had gotten a weapon that was a little bit too powerful for the stage that we were at. So yeah, it did so much damage to that body part that we always used to joke about the black hole thing, but that's a moment we still reference and joke about to this day. I think that was, you might have mentioned this a second ago, but I think that was from the same one that Will was from, right? The same.
Yeah, because Will was downstairs cooking for everybody.
Right, he was cooking. Chicken or something for everybody.
Chicken cordon bleu.
Because he was happy to finally be able to have enough money to get a fancy meal. Yeah, I don't think I was part of that. Will wasn't part of that fight because of the cooking.
No, you were. You joined in
late. I joined in late
because you were still cooking and trying not to burn down the safe house.
Yeah, exactly. It was that was a ridiculous session. One of our other players had he wanted to run up like what he thought, which was just like a block, and then come back down to get behind everyone. He didn't understand how we had the map laid out, so he ended up running like 7 blocks. And so by the time combat was done, like by the time he came back, combat was already over, and he was kind of pissed off about that a little bit.
And he was just like, "Yeah, I'm here.
I'm here now." It's like, well, everybody's gone now.
Everybody's dead.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
For me, it would have to be my character in our current Cyberpunk 2020 campaign. I've had a character before her, but I did not write a backstory, and so I didn't really have a full-on idea of who that character really was. But yeah, this one that I'm playing with right now is probably my favorite. Her name is Camille Blanc. She's a French immigrant nomad, and her backstory is pretty in-depth, so I was pretty proud of this character.
Yeah, very in-depth, and Camille is actually pretty important to the current main story for the campaign as well, because it's set in Camille's nomad camp, and I think that's allowed Camille to kind of shine a little bit more than some of your previous characters, because she has had a lot of importance to the overall campaign, and she's also kind of the connecting piece between all your characters. They all met through Camille. So yeah, she's a really good character.
What are some RPGs you're looking forward to that are coming out, or that you just haven't played?
There's actually a handful that I'm really excited for that we actually have in the making of getting. One is Candela Obscura from pretty sure Critical Role produced it.
They had something to do with the making. I don't know if they actually did. They develop it? Did they
I'm
create
pretty
it?
sure they did. They just
I
put
know.
it on some other website to have
Yeah.
made. We recently got that, and we're in the process of learning it to possibly run a campaign of it. Deadlands. It's based in pretty much a spaghetti western / horror themed.
Yeah, fantasy,
Yeah.
fighting like chupacabras,
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
I don't know. There's a couple
Spycraft.
more. Yeah, Spycraft.
Yeah, you just bought Spycraft the
Yeah,
other day.
yeah. Just randomly went into Half Price Books and was just like, "Where's your RPG section?" and came across that for like $10. And I was just like, "Well, it looks cool. It kind of gives off a James Bond vibe. Huge fan of the James Bond movies, so why not give it a try? It's $10. If we don't like it, no money really wasted."
Yeah, because it's still cool to collect them even if you don't like them. But Spycraft seems pretty cool. It's espionage, thriller kind of based RPG. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about all of the ones that Oz listed, but another big one for me is, and I don't own this one yet, I keep meaning to get it, and I just kind of keep forgetting, but I definitely want to get it and run it sometime soon or play it. It's the Alien RPG by Free League Publishing. It's based off of the Ridley Scott movie Alien, so it's like a horror space themed RPG. Seems really cool. It's got a lot of preset campaigns that I found out about with preset characters or pre-gen characters if you want, or you can do. It's like got two modes. It's called like story mode and cinematic mode. And I think cinematic mode, the idea is it's meant to be done in a single night, almost like a movie. And then story mode is a much longer campaign with a much more involved story, which I think is a really cool concept. And the art is beautiful in the book, and it's just really well put together. So, aside from the ones Oz mentioned, that's my other big one, is that Alien RPG.
I can think of two main ones that I really do want to play. One is D&D. I've always wanted to play D&D. Just before I met you guys, I never really knew anybody that would actually play with me or think that I, wasn't crazy by bringing it up. And then another one was one that I had found on Amazon, and it's called Paleo Mythic. And I don't know if it seems interesting to everybody else, but I really, really do want to play it.
Yeah, Paleo Mythic seems really cool. I'd never heard about it until you told me about it. And yeah, it's like, set in the Paleolithic era, but with mystical beasts, and I think there's like magic involved and stuff too. Seems really cool, really interesting idea. And then yeah, of course D&D. I feel like probably the reason Oz and I didn't mention that was just because we've both. Actually, have you ever played D&D?
No,
before?
I haven't played it yet, but that is also another one that I'm really excited to get into.
Yeah, we will be doing D&D at some point, probably pretty soon. We're gonna start D&D 5th edition. I've got some ideas for a campaign setup. We just haven't started yet because we wanted to start with Cyberpunk because the whole group had played Cyberpunk before. Well, most of the group had played, so everybody was more familiar with it. But yeah, we'll definitely be starting 5th edition soon. I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Okay, so how long is a typical game session?
That's an easy answer. It's, me personally, minimum 2 to 3 hours.
That can be dependent on the group, how invested people are in it. I think with RPGs, it really kind of depends on the person, but average is usually around 2 hours. I'd say 2 to 3.
The occasional 4-hour session if you get started early enough.
Yeah, but they can go all the way up to like 6, 7, 8 hours.
12.
We were reading about one group that had like, they had a session that was going on for like 40 something hours straight because they would like just take breaks to go to the bathroom and stuff like that and like eat food, but other than that they just kept
it was like
it
a
going.
50-hour long session.
Yeah, for like a
something
long
like
3-day weekend,
Yeah.
or probably even longer than that. So yeah, people can play for really long periods of time, but hours on average are about 2. anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours usually.
Do you prefer to play or run games?
I haven't really got to run a game yet, and it's something that's definitely out of my comfort zone, but it's definitely something that I am really excited to try. I really enjoy the whole character aspect behind it all, and just getting to play as a character throughout somebody else's story that you're pretty much writing for them.
Yeah. So I so far have been the one running everything that our current group has played, and so it would probably seem like I prefer running, but for me it's pretty equal. I really love running. I love creating a story. I love creating tons of NPCs and having them in. And I mean, we had a Lasers and Feelings campaign that was going on for probably like
Weeks.
I mean, well, months. It was probably like we probably did a total of 16, 17 sessions or something
And
like that.
you just continued the story each time.
Yeah, and I kept involving more NPCs that would join the group just so I could have more characters to play. I really do love running, but I also love being a player. You know, running definitely can be a little stressful at times, and there is a lot kind of riding on you as the GM. So as a player, it's a little bit easier to you just have your character ready, and then you can kind of just sit back and play when it's time to play. So I think there's pros and cons to both. I'm looking forward to some of the ones we're going to do where Mac and Oz will be running, so that way I can be a player too. So yeah, it's pretty even for me.
So I do like being a player, and I've not actually ran a game, but I will most likely prefer running a game over playing. And that's why I'm super excited about playing Deadlands, is because I will be the GM of it. So, what is your favorite and least favorite thing about tabletop RPGs?
So my favorite, we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. So my favorite thing is the creativity and the collaborative storytelling. I really love just people coming together, and especially if you're playing with a group of friends or people you know well, where you can kind of let your guard down a little bit and get a little silly with it and be willing to do voices and, you know, say stupid things and just have fun with it. I really just like the group aspect of it in general, and the collaboration. As for a least favorite thing, it really can just be the nitty gritty of the rules sometimes. I think a lot of the rules serve well, especially for specific RPGs, but I really enjoy the dice rolling and the stat checking. I think that's a ton of fun. However, sometimes with certain systems and certain RPGs, it can get to be a little bit too much, and you can kind of tell if it gets to be too much rolling and too much stat checking around the whole table. People kind of start to check out a little bit and kind of seem to be just ready to get back onto the storytelling. That's probably my least favorite, is just getting too deep into these stats.
I kind of go along with you with my favorite thing. It's just pretty much the group aspect, getting a huge group of friends together and just playing a game where you're all creating a story together is just awesome. And my least favorite thing is something that all three of us have actually experienced in one of our past campaigns, getting that one player who doesn't really get into it and is just kind of there because one of his friends said, "Hey, come play this game with us," and didn't really give it a chance, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, being too guarded, and then that's why I said that about not being very guarded about it. We've had players that you can tell. I think they might have felt a little bit awkward because they've never done it before, or they view it as nerdy and lame or whatever, but they're kind of trying to give it a chance, but they're not actually participating at all. That's always kind of a bummer, because then you try and involve them and say, well, hey, what do you think? And they're just kind of like, my character does this. Like, not even willing to talk in character, like role play at all. I mean, it's called role playing game for a reason. That's what RPG stands for, but not even willing to do that. I would agree that that is another major bummer when you're playing with a group.
For me, my least favorite would probably have to be when there's a player that I don't know if I'd say that's really into it or not, but that I would say is kind of wanting to take over. They don't really give the other players a chance to really talk or kind of put input in or have a say on anything. We've actually been in a campaign with somebody like that, and it was one of my first Cyberpunk campaigns, and
It was your first, wasn't it?
yeah, and it made me not really want to be very much involved, and I was just pretty much there silently on the sidelines, and it made that game extremely boring and unfun for me. So I like when everybody kind of mutually agrees that like we should definitely take turns with it, not talk over somebody, and everybody gets a chance.
Yeah, I would agree. It's important to let everybody, and you kind of feel like a bummer telling the person to maybe chill out a little bit because you know that they're having fun and you don't want to ruin their fun, but it's also like give somebody else a chance to get a word in edgewise. Yeah, we've definitely played with people that can be very commandeering, and just not let people have their own space. So, yeah, absolutely.
Where do I find players?
So finding players can be done in a few different ways. I think the most important thing is just trying to introduce people you know, even if they don't seem to be interested at all. Even if you tell them, "Hey, I'm putting together a D&D campaign," and they say, "Oh, that sounds dorky," or I've seen that on Stranger Things, and I don't want to do that. It's like, well, just give it a shot, even if they just do the one session and hate it, at least they tried. But a lot of people, they end up trying it once, and if they have a good group that they start with, they end up falling in love with it. So I think that's one of the most important ways, is just introducing people and trying to get people into it that might not be.
Yeah. Another good thing is kind of along the lines that you were saying, is just having a really good group of friends that you're already comfortable with, kind of going out of your way to be goofy or doing stupid stuff with each other, and then just say, hey, why don't we try something new and play D&D or Cyberpunk or even Lasers and Feelings. Just that you can look up the rules of that online, and it's just literally one page, and run a quick session of that just to get everybody's toes wet with tabletop RPGs. And then another good way of finding people for a group is going to your local, maybe comic book stores or
like retro game stores.
Retro game stores or anything like that, and just walk in and start up a conversation about whatever. Most of those places sell the dice that we have and the dice you need to play tabletop RPGs. And you ask them about their opinion on dice, and if they're just like, I don't really know, I haven't ever really played, well, that's your opening to invite them to be like, hey, why don't you, I'm thinking about putting a campaign together, and just, do you want to join? And sometimes those people become your best friends instantly just through playing this.
And you're probably going to be pretty hard pressed to find somebody that works there that's not a like-minded individual that has at least heard of RPGs. Even if they've never played a tabletop RPG, they've at least heard of it and maybe are interested. Or even if they're not interested, they at least will know what it is. I doubt you're going to have many cases of walking into your local retro game store and say, hey, would you want to check out Dungeons and Dragons with my group? And they're going to say, what's that? That's not going to happen.
That's highly unheard of.
Yeah, that's, it's not going to happen very often.
A more recent way to find players is joining Discords that are meant for finding players. And a lot of Facebook groups have actually popped up for certain areas or just everywhere to find players. So, yeah, that's another easy way.
Another thing is, like, if you can't find people in your local area, it's kind of like how Mac was saying, just joining a Discord. You can always play over Discord or any kind of...
I've seen people do it with Microsoft Teams.
Microsoft Teams.
Online RPG sessions are very common nowadays. Mm-hmm. That honestly is becoming more common than playing in person, just because it's easier to find people across the country that are willing to play than somebody locally, that you live near or are close to. So yeah, online RPG playing, while it's more fun to be in person, obviously, that is a great way to do it, and a ton of people have been playing like that.
What's the difference between tabletop RPGs and video games / board games?
So it's like the lack of limits for me with video games and movies and board games. All of those have a very set, in any video game there's a boundary. No matter how big it is, no matter how big of an open world game it is, you're gonna reach a point that you can't go any further because it's a virtual environment. It can't be infinite. That's just not going to happen. Even games like No Man's Sky with the 16 quintillion procedurally generated planets or whatever, there's still a boundary to it. There's always going to be a boundary, and you're always going to be limited by what the game's engine and what the developers allow you to do. And by extension, that does go into tabletop RPGs a little bit. You are a little bit restricted by what the world of the game and what the GM is willing to allow you to do. But tabletop RPGs in general are just a lot less restrictive. You can, if your mind can think it up and it fits in the world, you can work something out with the GM, unless you're playing with a crappy GM. But if you have a GM that's willing to work with you, then the only limits are your own imagination.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the lines with you. A tabletop RPG is literally something that's formed in somebody's head. And like you were saying, if you work it out with your GM, there's plenty of things, which I guess the technical term is home brewing a session or anything like that. If you want to add something, bring it up to your GM, or if you are the GM, bring it up to your group and see how they feel about it all. And 98% of the time, they'll be like, sure, why not add something that's not heard of in this world or we know of hasn't been done before.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be at least a few limits, but you can work things out, and it's just the limits of your own creativity.
So these questions are kind of more personal towards us and the channel. What made us want to start our YouTube channel?
The whole reason why I personally thought it was a good idea was just to have something to show my kids when they get older, in 20 years or whatever, however old they are. When we started this till then, I got something to show them. Like, if they ask me, what were you doing back when you were 23, 24, 25 years old? I can easily just show them, like, hey, this is what we were doing. This is kind of why your mom and me and your uncle were all just playing around a table with each other and rolling dice and just having a really good time doing it. And that's kind of the whole reason why I thought it would be a good idea to start the YouTube channel.
And hopefully, if nothing changes, we'll still be doing that when they're that age. But we can at least show them, hey, we were still doing it back then, too. We were doing it all that time ago. Yeah, another one, as for like how we started, we kind of just decided one day, hey, we're already doing this, and we've talked about doing things online, YouTube and social medias like that in general, so why don't we just start filming our sessions? That was kind of the thought process, and we just thought it would be fun, and it's not only to show your kids, as you said, it would also just be a good thing to show people we know in general, because we've had so many people that we know, when we tell them, they ask, what'd you do this weekend? And we said, oh, we played an RPG. We played Cyberpunk. They'll say, what is that? What's an RPG? And
all of my family.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of ways you can just kind of say, one of my go-tos, and I mentioned it earlier, is just saying, if you watch Stranger Things, have you seen, remember in the first episode when they're shooting fireballs at the dragon or whatever, or the Demogorgon, and they'll say, oh yeah, I remember that. Is that like Dungeons and Dragons? And so a lot of people nowadays are at least kind of aware of it, but they don't fully understand the scope of it and what you do. So that's another thing too. It's kind of hard to describe to somebody, well, it's a game that you're playing, but it's all in your head and on maps and paper that you write down yourself. People will sometimes, that aren't familiar with it, say, well, how do you play a game just in your head? So this is a way, having it filmed is a way to show people that we know, well, this is it. This is how you play. So that was a big one for me.
For me, it was more of because when I first started getting into them and playing RPGs and trying to find people to play with, my main problem was when I wanted to go on a rabbit hole on YouTube, there was almost nobody to watch. There was always just the same channels over and over and over again. And after you've rewatched all of their videos 6 times over, you don't really feel like watching them anymore. And I feel like there needed to be more channels out there. And so that's why I feel like that was one of the main ones why we created it. And then also it does give us a chance to show our kids later on in the future whenever we decide, maybe to play with them or like introduce them and have them in sessions. How did we come up with the name for our channel? So one of the main things was we've always noticed that, especially with the newer group that we have, that we're playing with our current session, a lot of us don't look like the typical people that would be playing RPGs. You just look at us out in public and you're like, well, yeah, some of them would, but then the other half, like, no.
I'm in the camp of the people that look like they would play RPGs.
And so
Sorry about that, bud.
That's fine. I don't care.
Throwing you to the wolves over here.
No, hey, I own it.
So one of the things that we were trying to come up with when we were coming up with a name was trying to find something that went along the lines of people who don't look like they would play RPGs, don't look like they would actually be friends and play together. And so we came up with Unexpected. And at first we kind of laughed it off, like, oh, we'll just have to come up with something similar to that. And then we just kind of mutually agreed, why don't we just name it Unexpected RPG?
Yeah, we were looking online on the different social medias we want to create. It wasn't taken like anywhere, which was nice. That makes things easy. And yeah, that was a big one I focused on, was, as Max said, the people not expecting us to even be friends. I've known Oz since we were like little kids,
5-6 years old.
Yeah, 5, 6. I was like 6 and he was 5, and even back then and still to this day, sometimes when people see us together for the first time, they'll say, you all don't seem like friends at all, or you wouldn't look like you would be friends. You look very different and like you're into different things. And so, especially when I'll tell people the group that I'm playing RPGs with, they'll say, I know some of those people, and I never in a million years would think that they would want to play all that nerdy kind of stuff, play Dungeons and Dragons and all that. So, yeah, we just felt it was kind of an unexpected group of friends, and we kind of wanted to capitalize on that and just show that, it can be an unexpected group of people that are willing to play. That's something I've thought a lot about, kind of with some of our previous questions about finding people to play. They're not always going to look like they would be into it, and they're not always going to outwardly be talking about it constantly or give you the impression that they might be into it, but then they might it might be one of their hobbies, or even if it's not, they might be more interested than you would think. You introduce them to it and they love it. So it's just kind of along those lines. Just wanted to show people that it can be unexpected, but it can still be something that people are into anyways.
So yeah, that was the more common questions that people ask us, ask other people, ask in general about RPGs.
Also, if you're more interested in seeing what else we're doing, you can also follow us on TikTok at Unexpected RPG, and also Instagram, Twitter, and
I think that's it.
Yeah, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and then YouTube, obviously. That's what this is on. Yeah, we have a few more videos on our TikTok, but we should be having full videos of our sessions sometime soon. We've been streaming on TikTok our sessions, but of course TikTok doesn't allow you to save those, but we should have sessions of our RPGs coming up on the YouTube channel pretty soon.
Thank you guys for watching, and this has been the first episode of the Unexpected RPG podcast. And if you don't care, like, comment, subscribe. We'll be back soon.